Hello my wonderful visionaries and welcome to the channel. Today I wanted to have a little discussion with you, a little chat about crossplay. Now the reason I've decided to make a video about crossplay was because Remnant 2 have recently dropped a crossplay update, and I think it poses a wider question across the industry on crossplay itself, live service games, multiplayer games that could really benefit from crossplay. And I think that this game was a prime example of a game that could have done far better with that crossplay exposure, the cross-pollination across communities. A game recently that has completely smashed everyone's expectations, Helldivers 2. I mean, as of 7 days ago on Game Rant, nearly 3 million copies, and a nice portion of those are PlayStation 5 players. I can't help but just think how much of an impact that has on a game's longevity. When your whole business model is based on having a player base that can interact with each other, that can join games, that can make friends and build a community, not having that community segregated I think is a really important thing. And I think a game like Remnant dropping this update now is of course better late than never, but I can't help but feel like they've missed the window where they could have completely caught fire. Remnant 2 back in the day when it originally came out was a well-received game, had a few issues, and then Remnant 2 came out and basically ironed out all of those issues. The game is challenging, it has great build diversity, it has good lore and world building, a lot of replay value. There's a lot to really love about Remnant, but it's not a game that's designed to be played single player. It's just not. The way the class system is structured, you have essentially damage dealing classes, and you have healing classes, and then you have kind of special classes. And when I jumped into the game initially, I played as a gunslinger, essentially a glass cannon, by myself. And I had a lot of trouble, especially at the early game, because I took 2 or 3 hits and I'd die. And a couple of the bosses have a lot of smaller enemies and they're quite difficult to manage. And I found it was quite challenging, and I kind of realised that this wasn't the right way to play this game. And if you want to play single player, it's highly recommended that you play like a medic role. The medic, I believe it's called medic, has the dog, and the dog can take aggro for you, they can deal damage, but importantly they can heal you, which is really, really cool. So it's a really interesting build, and there's a lot of different really interesting builds in that game, but they really complement each other really well. And if you want to play single player, it's highly recommended, especially if you're not an experienced player, to start with that medic, because you need that extra fallback. Now, if we had crossplay, in my situation, I had a lot of friends that were playing on PlayStation 5 that just couldn't play. So first of all, that would be more purchases of the game. They would have made more money if that crossplay was available, because I would have wanted to have played it with them. And I'd convinced them to, then realised it wasn't crossplay. And as someone who does own a PS5 and a PC, I want to play it on the format that I want to play it on, right? Like my PC is a little bit more powerful than my PlayStation. It will look a little bit better, run a bit smoother, so I wanted to play it on that. And so that's kind of like a tricky spot. Kind of going into the launch of that game, I think it really hurt its staying power. Community is really important, and Remnant 2 is that kind of the type of game that could develop a community that's far stronger than it already is. It's not a live service game at this point, but it could be. It could be a live service game, and a great one at that. Not everything needs to be live service. I'm a firm believer of that. But it had the roots, it had the foundation to be a game that has a lot of content out the gate, a decent roadmap that could be supported for a long time with a great community. Now, if you're selling 1 million, 2 million copies of your game, but your player base is segregated, it's just going to make it harder to maintain that unified approach when trying to manage all of those games, trying to manage the player base. You look at even just trying to find games, right? If everyone can join everyone, and you can cross-pollinate. I'm going to use that word a lot. Cross-pollinate. I think it's a no-brainer. Helldivers, in my opinion, is a far less complex video game. I would argue it's probably more fun. It's hilarious. It's got this great gameplay loop. The co-op elements are fantastic. It's hit at a perfect time. It's a complete runaway success. But I can't help but feel that if there was more attention being paid to the community of Remnant 2, that there would be people that were already entrenched in that ecosystem that maybe wouldn't have hopped straight over to Helldivers 2. And that's here nor there. Both games are exceptional games, and both games have their own audiences. My point is that even with the server issues that Helldiver has had, I've got friends that are playing on PS5, I play on PC, and we can all play together. And so if we ever want to hop into a game, there's a far larger pool of friends that I have that can access that, which means I'm on the game more often, right? We're all on the game a bit more often. We have a WhatsApp chat. You can just say, I'm free, cool, hop in, doesn't matter what platform you're on. That's definitely an issue with a game that doesn't offer that. And I think moving forward, if you're a developer and you want to make a game that has that staying appeal, that has an audience that's growing, I think, especially if it's a co-op game, if we're looking at a live service game or a co-op game where it's really important to have that, it's almost a prerequisite. You know, if you've got the budget to do it, you need to do it. And I can imagine that most studios that want to do this would do it, right? Like I'm not naive in saying that it's probably quite expensive. I don't know the network logistics behind crossplay across all those different platforms. But if you're in for the long haul and you want to support your game for a year, maybe 2 years, and you want to develop a community, I think that's really important, because the console base is a more casual player base. And if you can get a casual player base to mix with a more hardcore player base, and I'm not saying all PC players are hardcore, I'm not saying all console players are casuals, but that's just typically the trend. If you can get both of those communities converging together, you tend to get people that just play more of your game. There's more retention to your game. There's some of those console players can become a bit more serious once they get into the community side of things, and no one feels like they're missing out, right? There's not a different experience. It's all unified. It's, I would say, easier to have one single message as well when you're pushing out updates and that kind of thing. But I'm very excited about Remnant. I think when Remnant, well, this update's already released. I think when Helldivers starts to peter off slightly, or maybe the hype starts to dampen slightly, I'm gonna look to get more of my friends back into Remnant and play that. I think Remnant's definitely more of a serious, harder, more hardcore game that requires a little bit more cooperation and planning, and it's just a different type of experience, right? Helldivers seems like a very much a drop in and play. Do a couple of missions together, get some XP, and both of those games have an exceptional gameplay loop. They both deserve it. I just look at Remnant, and when that game first dropped, I was messaging the developers, I messaged them on Twitter, basically saying, like, is crossplay coming? Because I have people that are going to buy the game, that are going to play it with me, and we're waiting until now. And I think Helldivers has ultimately stolen that kind of thunder. You've got obviously the big games like, Apex and Fortnite that are always going to have those big player bases anyway, but there is that kind of slither, that little niche of people that don't want to play those games, that want that co-op experience, and they're being serviced now by Helldivers 2. And long may it continue. It's a fantastic game. I hope it gets more support. I'm going to be playing it more. I just think that this update for Remnant 2 is great that it's eventually happened. I think for the game's life cycle, the game's success, the roadmap for the game, and maybe even positioning for Remnant 3 has been somewhat compromised by the fact that it isn't a ubiquitous environment or an ecosystem, as it were. So, but yeah, that's my thoughts on crossplay. I think it's super important. for games now, especially if there's a significant online element to it. It essentially makes one player base a big unified player base, and I think that's only going to be a good thing for an online environment, an online game. But anyway, that's all I've got for you for this video. Please let me know in the comments below what you think about crossplay. Are you playing Helldivers? Are you playing Remnant? Are you going to drop into Remnant? And do you have any friends that play on different platforms that you can't play with right now on certain games that you wish had crossplay? I'd love to hear it all down in the comments. I'd love to know that I'm not going crazy and that I'm the only one who's thinking about this. So yeah, let me know in the comments below, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.